How's it going?
Good, yourself?
I'm good, man.
That is good. This is episode 24
Ooh.
of the Thought and Theology podcast, and I have a guest to the in front of me, Quartney. I don't know if I don't know about surname yet. Quartney, anyway. And I brought her on today to actually have a discussion about an interesting scenario that I was overhearing while in the car with Caitlin, my girlfriend. And you're discussing how you're having this, I don't know if you'd say conflict, but like
I've called it a crisis. I've called it a crisis before.
Yeah, a crisis, or you'd say a crisis in faith, really, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Or what would you say?
I've called it sort of maybe a denominational conflict.
Yeah.
Or a crisis of... It's not a crisis of faith in the sense that I'm... like, I know things that I do believe. Yeah. But it's definitely a lot of things that I believe that I'm questioning.
Yeah.
So there's a sense of crisis, but it's not like a world's being flipped upside down type crisis, maybe.
Yeah, okay.
In some ways. We'll find out how much of a crisis.
So when you say that, we're essentially talking in regards to you're trying to find a particular denomination of Christianity or like belief system, whatever you're going for.
Yeah.
To establish some sort of form of one truth, or like would you like to...
Yeah, I've come to think that within all of these sort of various, Baptist Christians, Catholic Christians, Pentecostal Christians, Anglican, that there is one objectively true denomination. Yeah. And it's not saying sort of that the others aren't valid or create false believers. Yeah. But that there is one that aligns with the teachings most correctly and is the one that God has instituted rather than humans. Yeah. If that makes sense. Mm. So, yeah, I used to sort of be like, you can kind of, there's that thinking of like all paths lead to the same thing within religion. Yeah. And I very much don't think that that's true. Okay. So.
Why is that?
Well, for starters, they all teach very different things. Yeah. So it's just illogical to say that you could, have a Muslim faith or have a Christian faith and you get the same place, because they both explicitly say that they are different from one another and they have different instructions on how to live. They have different ways of how to be a believer or how to be saved within that religion, how to go to heaven or hell. Yeah. And so how can you do two, like if you're following this one, how can you, let's say Islam is true. Yeah. How could you become a true believer who gets into heaven by not following its teachings, if it's true? Yeah. If Christianity is true, how could you not follow its teachings and get, both of them teach you don't just find yourself in heaven. There are things that have to happen. Yeah. So if one is true, then the other has to be untrue. Yeah. Logically. Yeah. Okay. So how far have you gone into this sort of research? Like how far have you gone? And we'll start with that actually. And I'll continue after that. How far is in depth or breadth?
So because you're trying to find a one truth in that sense. So how are you going? Well, one, how much depth are you going into it, and what methods are you using to find out what is the truth?
Yeah, so I'm trying to go into as much depth as I can. Yeah. I really don't want to leave any stones unturned. Yeah. I don't want to sort of find something out and regret my decision. Yeah. Because I'll sort of be all in wherever I end up finding myself. And my method would be sort of my background is in, I guess, history as a methodology. And so for me, it's primary sources. So if I'm looking into Christianity, it would be the writings of his disciples, the earliest believers and how they interpreted what became the closed canon of scripture and what they implemented from then. So, you could pick up the Bible and it's a bit cryptic to read, but because it was an oral tradition before it was ever written down.
Yeah.
The people at the time knew exactly what the writings meant because they
were there.
Yeah, they were there. They had heard it talked about. They were talking about it, and then they decided to write it down. And so I'm looking into how that got passed down, and at what point someone might have come along and had a different interpretation. And so I would count that as not true, because they are rejecting the living memory. They're rejecting the primary source.
So you'll have to really go pretty far back, and then you'll have to establish whether or not this is the original source.
It's taken me a while.
Yeah.
Because we're essentially talking a few thousand years.
Yeah. What? This is going to be a real side thing. Have you ever heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So would you have to be looking into something like that?
Unfortunately, I don't know Greek.
Yeah.
I did study a lot of translation.
Yeah.
Just sort of a lot of my subjects in linguistics at uni were on the principles of translation.
Yeah.
So, I won't be able to read them in their proper Greek.
Yeah.
But sort of, listening to Greek scholars talk about them.
Yeah.
I think I'm able to pull apart whether or not they are translating correctly by their method.
Yeah.
Sometimes you've got whole committee translating, sometimes it's just one person.
Yeah. And
you want that second, third opinion. You want a group of translators rather than one when reading something like the Dead Sea Scrolls. So that's why some Bible translations, it'll just be, John Smith's translation.
Yeah.
And that is held in a lot lower regard than, a committee of translators.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first I probably should say what the Dead Sea Scrolls are. They're like one of the original texts, aren't they?
Yes, they are the original Greek. No, not Greek. I think they're the ones in Hebrew. The Greek is the Septuagint, if I'm pronouncing that right.
I have to do more research, to be honest. But,
there's quite a few early writings because in Jewish tradition they sort of rewrote things a lot. So because you didn't, books aren't as they were today.
Yeah.
You read someone else's, and I might get your original manuscript next to mine and rewrite it out word for word.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of copies, but the Dead Sea Scrolls were the, I think they were the earliest Jewish, because the New Testament was written in Greek, but I think some Jews also wrote some.
So
Hebrew. That's what I'm looking for.
Yiddish or Hebrew? No, it would be
Yiddish. No, none of it was Yiddish.
Yeah.
Would have been cool. I think it's a cool language.
Yeah.
I think it sounds cool.
A lot of phlegm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think it's great.
So essentially you're going to have to. Well, how are you going about obtaining that sort of information? Because it is quite that's really you need to spend money and travel sort of thing.
Yeah. Well.
Would you not or?
No traveling necessary, because I don't really need to look at the originals in person.
Yeah.
But I, as sort of a recent alumnus of uni, I still have access to the online library resources.
Yeah.
Do this, kids at home. Whenever you're at uni, take advantage of things so on the library search website, there's still all of the resources that anyone doing a bachelor or master's or PhD in theology has access to.
Yeah.
You still have access to.
Okay.
So finding things that way, which is great. But also just trying to read whatever I can get my hands on. I've downloaded a lot of books on Kindle. By sort of scholars on, let's say, either side of an argument, and I've just read both arguments.
Yeah.
Just seeing which one is the most convincing, logical, rational, supported, peer-reviewed.
Okay.
All that jazz.
Okay. That'd be quite an interesting endeavour, I think.
Yeah. Time-consuming, but very important for me, I think.
Yeah. Oh, fuck, I had a thought, it just left me. It just, it was actually in regards to what you were just saying.
With how I find things.
Yeah. Yeah, that really did leave me. It's definitely night shift brain.
Night shift brain.
Night shift brain, no. So maybe we should just, what is your probably should establish what was your original upbringing in regards to your faith and stuff like that. What was the original?
Yeah, so I grew up going to church with parents who, my mum and dad pastored a church that was Pentecostal.
Yeah.
So I think that falls under sort of Christian evangelicalism.
Yeah.
It's a very recent denomination. It's just over 100 years old.
Yeah.
And I had a really good experience there. I know people can have all kinds of experiences in any church denomination. But I remember growing up with a lot of friends and family and support around us and feeling very safe, very free to express myself.
Yeah.
And not very restricted, sort of in a... Well, I guess we use the word a lot in religious circles, like it wasn't a legalistic type thing. So I was never dragged to church. I was never forced to go. Yeah. And I grew up with it as normal because I was going since my fetus days. So
yeah,
I really, was part of that.
Okay, that's interesting. So let's go down a bit of the line of Quartney's life. So from there, you've got that as your foundations of a belief system for yourself. Mm-hmm. You have studied history.
Yeah.
And linguistics.
Yeah.
Italian.
Yeah.
So you've got the tools. You've got the basing. So like most of my queries in regards to these things are more of like, when you're arguing in regards to what is the most logical, you would also have to determine, even if it's logical, is it actually true? Because like a lot of logic can be non-factual, because you can speak in logical terms, but it's not necessarily a factual thing. So let's say if you were examining a text, how could you, if it's the original source, even then, how are you going to be able to determine that that actually is a truthful and logical and rationale for a belief system? Yeah,
so sort of if I'm reading any text with that is religious, I think I have to start with the basis of, okay, am I a theist or an atheist?
Yeah.
Do I believe there's a God and there isn't? And because of my background, agnosticism was never an option when you're so fully invested in something or just so exposed to it. You can't really just be like, I'm not sure. You've you've got to pick something. And so to me it is there's always going to be an element of belief, and I think that is true on both sides. People say to be a religious person you just have to have this blind faith, but if you're not, you can be a person of science. And I don't think that's true. I think that's a mischaracterization of both sides, because there aren't scientific traces to the beginning of the universe. That people, you have to believe in, was it the Big Bang, was it how does evolutionary theory work? And there've been things that they've traced back, but nothing concrete. So to me it's like, what's more logical, to believe that the world created itself or to believe that the world was created? And the way that our world functions, it's out of line with the laws of physics for our world to create itself. If that were how our world came about, that would continue to happen, because our world would be based off of different laws of physics. But because we have the world that we have, am I making sense?
I'm listening to you, but I've got a few counter arguments. From the standpoint of science, like, even though like they can't really, within regards to like theories like the Big Bang theory and evolutionary theory, in regards to collecting evidence to be able to actually somewhat try to prove this is the thing, the scientific method is okay with being disproved, because the point of the scientific method is to find some sort of objective truth. So like, if that could be potentially wrong, and that could also lead to the potential answer of a creator, depending upon your methods.
I was very open-minded. I haven't really spoken to anyone who is so willing to rectify science and religion.
Yeah.
People polarize them far too much.
Yeah, because I think there's a misunderstanding of why science came about. Because science came back from the Christians to prove God existed. So it has that step of logic in order to prove something is objectively factual, and define what the truth is objectively. But the issue with that is maybe the existence of a creator is actually outside of our objective reality. And then that's when it becomes I think, would the term be metaphysical, and it's more of a logical step of assertions afterwards. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
I am confused. I think God is metaphysical.
Yeah.
But what do you mean by outside of objective reality? Do you mean just false?
No, as in maybe God isn't this is also another hypothesis.
Yeah,
maybe God is outside of the observable universe.
I think he is. Yeah. I think because he has created the universe.
Yeah.
He is outside of it in a sense.
Yeah.
But I also believe he is in and through all things.
Yeah.
So.
I should start with my step. I'm agnostic.
Yeah.
So I think it's illogically consistent to say there is, but saying there definitely is as much as saying there definitely isn't. We've had this conversation when we're in Bright, because it's a bit you can go through those steps of logic, like you're saying, that the universe just creating itself or something creating it. Those arguments are equal in the sense of their possibility. So saying one is for, one is the other is inconsistent to logic. So all I can do is fence it based upon that rationale, if that makes sense.
It does. I hear you. I think that's very fair, because people are so on one side or the other. God absolutely exists and I know it for sure.
Yeah.
Or people are, God cannot exist and I know it for sure.
Yeah.
I think in a certain sense the most rational thing to be is possibly agnostic, because you're saying, well, without conclusive evidence.
Yeah.
I would submit there isn't conclusive evidence on either side.
Yeah.
It makes most sense to be agnostic. I think what pushes people either one would be personal experience.
Yeah.
So in my experience, anyone I've known who is strongly opposed to there being a God is because of extreme suffering or trauma, those things that make you question, how can people teach that there's a good God with all this evil in the world?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff makes you hurt and bitter, understandably. And people like myself who go extreme the other way and feel convinced that there is a God is from personal experience.
Yeah.
But it's experiencing him himself.
Yeah.
And I know, this, I don't really care how this sounds, even though it can sound nutty. It's that sort of personal intimacy you get during prayer or during times of sort of worship or any kind of ritual daily living. I feel his presence in and around me often.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that I'm imagining it. I feel that I know him personally. So that's sort of what pushes me from this either way to, yes, I believe in him, because I've seen miracles. I've experienced his goodness, answers to prayers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll keep a question for later, because that'll be something to bring up afterwards.
Yeah.
Because I'm just trying to form how I'm going to ask the question, because that's an interesting one. Also, with religion, some people need that because it answers a question.
Yeah.
It's very quite scary.
Yeah, absolutely. That existential dread.
Yeah, because it's quite weird being alive.
It is. I think you get that sense of our distinctness as humans when you look at any kind of animal. You look at this thing that's just, they are all pure instincts, and they don't have these existential crises, and they don't experience love in the same way that we do. For them, it's purely rational. It's purely for mating. You put any two animals together and you can make them mate, and there's not that same sense of that sort of illogical way about humans where we love people that it doesn't make sense to love. We love people who don't love us back. The way we experience the world isn't instinctual. It's we all have different personalities and thoughts. And that's also something I think the science can't quite explain, because
it's more of a psychological thing.
Yeah.
And that's quite a subjective field. But
our instinct to survive, logically, should dominate over a lot of other things, but often it doesn't.
Yeah. But you could also do the argument that, like, we're very complex social creatures.
But why? If we have evolved and you know, during this entire process of survival of the fittest, you know, according to Darwin, we should be weeding out traits that make us weak, and yet we try to protect the most vulnerable in society, the most compassionate.
Yeah.
And that really doesn't make sense.
Well, you could go, like, it could be an extreme argument, well, not really extreme argument, but like you could argue that maybe if it is via like natural selection, that the like being highly sociable and caring is actually something that is beneficial, because numbers keep you safe. Out in the wild anyway. Like, having a shit ton of people is going to stop a bear from killing you, because 1-on-1's shit, 10-on-1's easier.
But that depends. If you're taking care of, like, there's always a reason for it though when they do it. If an animal is taking care of a weaker animal, it's not just to have numbers so that they are safer. If a predator comes, they will risk themselves to defend.
I hear what you're saying. I'm not there yet. Like, I'm saying, like, if it's over like millions of years, it's maybe just gotten to that point that with those evolutionary traits, they've gotten so extreme that we're actually even willing to look after our group even when it makes no sense, because that's how our evolutionary traits have expressed themselves.
But why? Why have they expressed themselves that way?
Because of how useful having people around and looking after people is.
But we do it when it's very, very not useful at all.
But that's why I'm saying, like, it's something that's happened over, like, it probably started out as something that was very rational. We need these numbers to do this. We won't look after the other people. Then slowly over time, an individual came in and started caring for individuals that are weaker, and they didn't necessarily need to be there.
But why would they do that? Because of
an over-exaggeration of expression of sociability over time, like, not like over millions of years, as in like let's say, for example, like, there's certain evolutionary abnormalities that make no sense because they're not actually logically perfect, like in some creatures. I can't give an example at the moment, but there are creatures like that. It'd be something like that. It'd be like not a defect, but like an overexpression of something that's not necessarily rational. Same with like a body part or a pie, like a blood vessel being.
It might not be rational, but is it so unhelpful as this trait is that we're talking about, where we care for the weak? I see what you're saying, that it's an over-exaggeration. But if we are creatures that have evolved and all there is the physical matter and there's no supernatural sense, then...
that doesn't leave out... Like, I don't think natural selection leaves out a supernatural aspect.
How would you define the supernatural aspect if, according to... a Big Bang followed by evolution?
I've got a weird metaphysical, so not a metaphysical, I guess you could say. I got a weird...
Dish.
So as I said, I'm agnostic and I can only go off of what is so far observable. Like, the closest thing I can get to, like, a spiritual sense is that, like, we're actually just we're unique expressions of the universe that has just been created. You and I are the same thing. We are expressions of the universe, but just different. Like, we are the universe. You and I are the universe, but different expressions. So you and I are the same thing.
We're both molecules,
and we're both interacting with one another, even though that we're one and the same. So in a sense that, like, in a spiritual sense, we are all connected to, like, ourselves and to the world around us, and that could even mean God, because God created the universe and God is the universe. So therefore...
Is this what you believe?
No, this is not what I believe, but this is what I can rationalize out. Because we are formed of the universe, and therefore we are the universe, or part of it. We probably we only segregate ourselves probably for some other reason, but we probably, if you rationally think about it, we are no different from it. We're just a different expression within it. And you and I are the same thing. Just, you're Quartney and I'm Matt, but we're still the same thing.
But our brains think
differently.
So differently.
Yeah, but
we make different decisions.
We're just this one thing of this huge complex system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing.
Yeah. So we're not separate, we're the same. It sounds funky because we're
both the same and separate.
Yeah, exactly.
It's both and, not either or.
Because like in the subjective manner, we are separate. In the objective manner, we are the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that, I think.
And it's and that's where like you could probably start bringing in like the potential for there being a creator, like, and that feels like but that's probably the closest thing I can get to expressing spirituality, like that connectedness sort of thing, and that's if that makes sense.
I think so.
Yeah, because then you'd have to but then the issue with that conflicts with Christianity, because Christianity, like you were saying, segregates human beings from animals and all sorts like that.
We're the only creations made in God's image.
Yeah, and that sort of thing. And whereas with that sort of that sort of story is saying that we're the same we're one and the same but different. So like I am still Matt, the subjective person who decided to identify as Matt, but I am the universe that is just moving through time.
There aren't any I think strong contradictions, because it is a little vague. If you start asserting more specific things, there'd probably be points where I'm saying, okay, this conflicts with Christianity.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a sense in which we're all created matter, we're all mankind.
Yeah.
We all came from Adam and Eve. There's definitely that sameness. And then I would just say the uniqueness is that God designed each and every one of us to be our own person. So whether that uniqueness is too different from how you picture the subjective differences between us is pretty nuanced, I guess.
Yeah.
But
it's a very weird thing. I'll continue that afterwards. But do you see where I'm coming from though?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, because then therefore, if that is the case, therefore you and I are part of God. If God is the creator, because if we're in God's image, and with that whole line, we are a part of God and God is part of us. Like we're all just that one thing. We are an expression of this.
Yeah, that's probably where it might start to differ.
Yeah.
Because we don't, even though God has made us, He hasn't. Yeah. He's given us sort of His divine image in the sense that there is beauty in humankind objectively.
Yeah.
And we are made as good creatures, but He hasn't given us all of His divine attributes. We are not omnipotent, we are not all-knowing.
Yeah.
So in that sense, we are not part of Him in a sort of physical sense.
Yeah.
We are created beings. He is a creator, but His mark is on us, is how I would sort of assume. That's the wrong word, but... Because if we're part of God, shouldn't we have some of His characteristics?
Not necessarily. Like if he is part of the like if he is the expression of the universe, if He is the entire universe, we could just be one attribute to like the million other attributes that He has in qualities. Yeah, we do show His attributes. Yeah, some, but we won't show them all because maybe some other aspect of the universe expresses that. Yeah, I think we'd agree on that point. Yeah. So there's a lot of motifs within, I think, most monotheistic religions of, we can see an attribute of God in ourselves or in nature. So a common one is we can see His consistency in the sun rises and sets every day. Yeah. God is consistent like that. We can see His might in the mountains and the waves. That's a strong motif. Yeah. We can see His gentleness in God, designed and created little kittens and bunnies. Yeah. But we can also see His power in He created lions and whales. Yeah. So there's sort of bits of Him we can see in everything. Yeah. But not every little thing holds all those attributes. Yeah, He's the only one who is all-knowing, all good, completely pure and loving, whereas we have sinned and are now tainted by... all of creation is tainted by evil. Yeah. Would be a core Christian belief. Yeah. So, with your experience with God, what's that? Can I ask what's that experience like for you? What justifies you to actually believe that experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, for my sort of first 12 years of my life, I didn't have any, I would say, personal experience of God. It's sort of I was a young child and sort of believed what I was told. And then my first personal experience was when I was 12, about to be 13. And I got this strong sense that God loved me and knew me, and that I was sort of talking to him, and it just came with very strong emotion. So I was sort of, I had a religious experience, you can say, and I was crying very heavily, and I was just consumed by thoughts of, oh my goodness, the God who created the entire world loves me.
Yeah.
It's that sort of mixture of the divine and lofty with the intimate and personal that just overwhelmed me. And since then, I guess in the following 13 years, giving away my age, that has been continued. And there's definitely seasons in times in life where things are a lot harder. I think like a lot of people can get that sense of like, God, where are you? I don't feel you anymore. I don't get those nice mushy feelings.
Yeah.
And it's times like that when I have to know that I can't rely on feelings, even though they're valid and there's some truth, they're not always true. It's hard. Like truth might not be a good word to use with feelings because they are very subjective.
Yeah.
So I guess it's times like that when I remember my feelings are subjective and that I might not feel happy and cozy right now, but that doesn't mean God isn't protecting me and providing for me. But yeah, most commonly it's a sense of sort of an internal sense of belonging. Sometimes it can be a sense that there's sort of more and there's a bigger picture, and I just think and feel that there is another entire life to come, and that everything that I worry about and all of the injustice and all of the evil will be dealt with, and that we were created to have an experience of life that is not tainted by evil or sin. And I get a lot of comfort out of the times when I am just thinking about that, and there's this sense of completeness, that sort of, I don't know, that angst of life that you can sort of just push down and not really want to address because there just aren't enough answers for it.
As in like an existential angst?
Yeah. I don't know, some people seem to sort of go a long time not ever feeling it or acknowledging it or ever thinking about it, but I guess I'm quite, I don't want to say sensitive, but, I think deeply about things, and I question a lot.
Yeah.
And that sense of frustration, of angst, of injustice, I feel like it's all sort of answered in the Christian narrative.
Yeah.
Of why things are how they are and what they will be.
So would you say also for I don't know, a Muslim, would they be saying something similar? With their experience with Allah,
I don't know if I can answer for that. I would assume so.
Yeah.
I mean, in my thinking, if you're going to dedicate your life to something, you'd want to hope that it's worth it.
Yeah.
If you're going to be someone who goes to church or temple every week, who spends a lot of time giving time and money, I'd want to hope you don't just feel guilted into it or duped or tricked.
Yeah. That you have some sort of sense of connection to this. Yeah.
So I would hope so. I've never heard that personally from any Muslim person or any of my friends who were brought up in that.
Yeah.
But I might just not have spoken to the right person.
Because because I always find it quite interesting when people describe their experiences like that, and everyone who has some sort of belief system has those sort of experiences. So like the question is like when you're trying to pursue that truth, if everyone's experiencing that in a different sect of religion, are they all wrong when they're all espousing truth?
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think my belief, and this is probably this would be widely accepted in Christianity, is that even if you get some doctrinal aspects wrong, God is not sort of limited by that. Yeah. So let's say you join a church down the road, and I know someone exactly like this actually. Joined a church somewhere. It was quite cultish. They didn't know, but they did experience God in it, and came to have a genuine faith, and has lived their life following Christian teachings and having fulfillment in that. Yeah. But they found him somewhere that does not teach good things. Yeah. Because, we believe that God is not limited by people's shortcomings. Yeah. So I think you can find God anywhere. Yeah. But when I say anywhere, I mean like, I've had some of these religious experiences, I'll call it, doing the most mundane things, like mowing a lawn or doing a uni essay. Yeah. But I think that, you can find him in a Christian church that maybe some of their teachings are off. You can still find God. Yeah. But I would argue that if it's not a Christian church and it's a, I don't know, Eastern Orthodox, or a Hindu church or something, that I don't see someone finding the same God that I believe in, because all of the teachings they're reading about him are completely different. Yeah. Whereas within all of Christianity and all the different denominations, the very, very core things are often the same, and that's why you can find God, because if you're reading about a Trinitarian God who is 3 persons, who explains that the path to salvation is only one way, and it's through his son Jesus, you'll find that in the worst of churches. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I'm hearing you.
Whereas you can't find Jesus in Hinduism because he's not there at all. Yeah.
But that is if you're in the world of Christianity.
Well, it is all over the world.
But it is now.
Yeah.
Wasn't at a period of time. So like this is like, I'm trying to figure out how I can say it.
Don't worry about offending me. If that's
I'm not trying to offend. I'm not going to offend you at all. Because I said before, like I'm like on that fence. So I'm not trying to be offensive. And like most of my questioning is going to be around because if that person in the cult has found God, and if that God's the same as yours, and the teachings are somewhat off, then wouldn't that bring all teachings of mankind off, and that the experience of God is the only true aspect of their belief? Because like with all these denominations, they're realistically an interpretation. Mm-hmm. And even from the original sources, those are like a subjective interpretation from the person, because not everyone's going to like a scenario. Not everyone sees the scenario as exactly the same. There's also their emotions, their feelings, and their own subjective bias at times that comes into play.
Do you mean with the like early writings, for example, when they're documenting what's happening when Jesus was alive?
Yeah, that sort of thing. Or like even not that, even like down the line, like till now. Right. Like there's been all those little things that have just created all these different sects, and they are still experiencing God, but they're all saying different things. So, so maybe God isn't necessarily an identification within any sect.
Right, yeah.
And that's why in that car with Caitlin, as when she was saying, like, if I was going to believe in a God, I wouldn't believe in any religion, I just believe in God. Because God would be God, and that's it. I can't argue against that, because God is God.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say I'm Christian, I'm not going to say I'm Muslim, I'm not going to say I'm anything, I'm just going to say there is God. And I'm just going to keep living my life the way I am, because that's as far as I'm aware that there is just God.
Yeah, I understand what you mean.
Yeah. Because maybe, would that be the one truth? Or like, would it be, like, or is the one truth like that, but in the first encounters with all those experiences of the first people?
Well, I think that's what I'm leaning towards.
Yeah.
With all these denominations, I'm leaning towards Catholicism.
Yeah.
Because it is the most faithful to the lived memory.
Yeah.
Of we've got this Bible, we've got these sacred writings, and how Jesus's disciples interpreted them and taught them in person was personally handed down. They would train someone up in the teaching. So each apostle, that's a new one.
Kim Impossible.
When you're when you're being an apostle at 12 p.m. and then you got to go save the world. So huge fan.
That's right. Yeah,
huge
fan.
Jericho once went as Kim Possible for it. Yeah, she looked great. Shout out Kiosk.
She doesn't listen.
Oh,
she probably never will.
I'm on.
She might
has
do
to.
this one. She has to. Yeah.
I'll be like, this is your Christmas present. I'll give her a recording.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, on a cassette tape.
Yeah. Make her a mixtape. I remember what I was saying.
Yeah.
I don't.
You remember, but you don't.
What was I saying?
So you got...
Oh, apostles. Yes. Yeah. So each apostle had a, let's call it a Padawan. Someone who they trained in the knowledge of the scriptures.
Of the Force.
Yeah. There's a lot of religious references in Star Wars, and I like that. And someone who is their successor.
Yeah.
And so they taught them absolutely everything. Yeah. And so that lineage directly from Peter and the rest of the removing, although Judas had a replacement, so the rest of the 12.
Yeah.
That carried on. Peter went on to become the first head of the church, the Pope, and that has continued on. And I believe I came to know God through sort of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Not a tangent, but a denomination that sort of sprang out from Catholicism. And so your question, well, why do we need to have these distinctions if you find the same God in all of them?
Yeah.
Is for a few reasons. Firstly, the Bible teaches that God wishes that everyone would come to know him personally and have a father-child relationship and go to heaven by, accepting Jesus's sacrifice for the sins of mankind. And because, there's a bit of theology to that, once you break down who is Jesus, why did he come, why do we need to be saved, the more you don't guard teaching, the more open that is to be changed. And so you've got religions that sprung up like Mormonism, who find the Bible and without trying to understand the lived memory of what it meant, without going to the people who had passed down what it meant, have read it, misinterpreted it, and started a new religion. And so maybe you'll find God in it, but you have less chance because the teachings are so different from the teachings that Christian believers believe are God inspired. So the Bible says that all scripture is God breathed. Humans wrote it, but God breathed. And there's definitely an element of belief in that. That's something that I can't scientifically say to you. God wrote this book himself.
Yeah, we can't.
So
it's all written by man.
Yeah, it is written by man. And that's something that you do have to just accept by faith.
Yeah.
Is that it's God breathed. But yeah, does that make sense? Sort of, if you don't guard the teachings, they will be changed over time. A long lineage of things. Like the old Chinese whispers.
Yeah, I'm hearing you. Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Just trying to think. Hold on.
I hope that makes sense.
It does make sense because, like, what you're saying is that, like, the teachings that have occurred are from the man Jesus Christ, who's the fella who sacrificed himself for our sins, and he is one of the representations of God who is giving us this information on how we should lead our lives in order to get to this the divine place called heaven, or to avoid hell, if there is such a thing. And that's all done, and we're trying to keep those teachings through the Jedis.
Yeah.
In order to, what we consider to live a proper life, in order to reach that end, and yet, yeah, that's basically what you're saying. Is it? Does it sound like?
Yeah, it's maybe a really crude analogy might be a pirate's got a treasure map.
Yeah.
And, you've got the path towards the X.
Yeah.
But if enough changes, every time a change is made, it's harder to get to the X.
Yeah.
Whereas if you stick to the original, the Dead Sea Scrolls, you've got that direct part to the X.
Yeah.
But it's more nuanced than that, because it's not just a path, it's a language that comes into factor it. And so language is beautiful but confusing.
Yeah, and affects perception.
Yeah.
Yeah, and interpretation.
But
Yes, okay.
What I've come to think about language is, why, if you were a god and you were going to make a book for humans, if you were going to make some kind of pathway, why use language, something that's so susceptible to be misunderstood? Because, and I think the reason is, the purpose of the Bible isn't just a roadmap to heaven. If it was, it'd be a much smaller book, and it would only have one type of writing. It would be instructional. But when you look in the Bible, there's poems, there's love songs, there's historical narrative, just telling what happened, there's wisdom literature, there's all kinds of genres of writing. And I think the reason is the Bible's purpose, sort of contrary to popular opinion, isn't to tell us what to do, but it's to tell us who God is. And that's why there are so many genres of it. Why would you ever use a song to tell someone how to get somewhere? But read it, and that's why it can be sort of so cryptic at first read. But when you look at it from the point of view of, this book will tell me who is God the Creator, and in turn, who am I, then it's easier to understand and pass on.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it'd be much simpler if you just made a map.
I would love to have, not like just the Bible, but like I think, what would the term be, consolations? As in, like, having like all these religious texts being compiled into a book in order to like see the contrast of the storytelling, and whether or not there actually is a major difference between what would be who is God.
Just buy them all. Buy a Quran, buy a Bible, buy a Torah.
Be great if it's a summary, but it won't be.
No.
But like being able to like, because then like this is where it gets really hard, because like, and that's where if you're a skeptic, I don't trust people and I don't trust writing. This is from like my own perspective. Like, even if the book, like the Bible, is what God is, I'm still not going to fully trust it. Simply on the fact that I know a man has, or like a person has written it, and I know that people are faulty. So all I can trust is that maybe one day I'll have an experience of God, and God can guide me to whatever path they want. Or maybe God is already doing that through me today, through all the actions I take. And it's maybe more of a subconscious thing than an actual written God, like a written expression of God. But that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. Like, for you to be able to then, it's like trying to find what is close to the original source, and then saying, yep, that is definitely the case, that'd be very difficult. That's a very long road, wouldn't you think? Or
the main problem is there's just so much to look through. I could really waste my time in loopholes. So I've tried to categorize it into the biggest differences between religions or denominations. And start with that, rather than tiny things I could nitpick.
Yeah.
So I've sort of I've had to organise it and I guess approach it like a project I might have done at uni.
Yeah.
But what I found is really helpful is to just I'll listen to a debate, two people on either side, and just see who's the most convincing.
Yeah.
And that's gone quite well so far. You know, I don't always have to do my homework when other people have done it so well.
Yeah.
So
True.
Yeah, I think it can be overwhelming. I'm hearing what you're saying about that. There's that human element.
Yeah.
But I think
and this is not to say like what I'm saying is true either.
Yeah, yeah.
So like,
it's all up in the air.
It's all just an idea in my head.
Yeah. Anything is possible and anything can happen.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, if you were to look into it and look into all these texts, I think the more you look into how those cultures handed on teachings, how translation worked, it does go from being something that is like, oh, I'm scared to approach this and put any trust in it because it's so open, to it's something that you can definitely see enough reasonable evidence either for or against.
Yeah.
So, does that make sense? It's not something that worries me as much anymore, the human element, because, you know, things were, so like, for example, with the disciples, and they're all writing down what happened, but you're like, they've got their bias, they've got their, how do we know it's accurate? Is because it was all compared. So the four Gospels weren't, you know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, they weren't all written separately and never compared. There were, I can't remember which one was written first actually, but one was written first and sort of copied. Someone else wrote theirs, and then the fourth one was written. There's a poor way of explaining it, but I can't believe I'm forgetting.
Okay.
There's a name for the doctrine of I'm sort of throwing around religious terms, so just let me know if I should just clarify or define one for anyone listening.
It's okay.
Because I forget what words are used exclusively in the religious community, and someone else might be like, what the heck do you mean when you just throw around doctrine? It just means teachings, a group of teachings. Yeah. You know, it could be like a secular term might be ideology or something. Yeah. Although they're not perfectly synonymous. But what was I saying? Yeah, so they're compared. It's not just someone wrote this and someone else had to read and go, oh, that's what Jesus did that day. Okay, I guess we'll publish this. Like, all of the eyewitness accounts compared their writings. And, I witnessed this, I witnessed that. And so if you read all four of the Gospels, you've got identical overlap with retellings of the same event. It might be from a different perspective, but none of the facts are different. So, they are all from different perspectives, but they don't say largely different things. One guy might have included a story, another guy didn't witness, but most of them, they have them in common.
Okay.
I hope that made sense.
Like you can go down rabbit holes and
you can.
It's
a temptation.
It's a very long, and because it's one of those questions of it really is the existential question. I don't want to rush it. I'm trying not to. So don't rush it. Well, you got your whole life ahead. It's so funky.
I'm trying not to be influenced by sort of opinions of people around me that are just based on personal preferences. So, because there's so much difference between Protestants and Catholics. All of my Protestant friends are antagonistic, maybe not all of them, most of them, towards Catholicism. Sometimes for simple reasons like, I don't like the way the priests wear these weird robes. And so I'm not going to take that into factor. Because that's just a personal preference. Or sometimes it's, but what about all the evil? And I think I've come up against that, but I think my response is just, you will find awful, evil people in any group, religious or not, anywhere in the world. So I can't let that be the defining factor of, I couldn't follow these teachings because there are men who've gotten a position of power and abused it. They weren't.
We need another podcast to discuss good and evil. when they've had a good night's sleep, because I could definitely go through that.
Yeah, I'm down.
Because that is very... That's a rabbit hole of a conversation as well.
I love rabbit holes.
Yeah, because good and evil is... Yeah.
If you hadn't given this such a good name, you could call it the rabbit hole.
The rabbit hole, yeah.
But Thought Anthology is...
I thought that was a pretty good name.
It's Chef's Kiss. Yeah.
Hopefully it blows up and I get paid. I can quit my job.
But you're so good at your job.
Yeah.
Matt's a nurse, if you didn't know.
Yeah, mental health nurse.
Mental health nurse.
Oh, fuck. So I don't even know, like, I feel like we covered quite a lot there.
Maybe we could do a water break, because I've talked a lot.
Yeah, go get some water, Get
My
some...
throat is dry.
You want a kombucha?
Ooh!
Yeah, I got kombucha.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Kabicha.
Kabicha.
My friend V, who calls it a kabicha.
Yeah, not a sponsor, Lost Bros. Where was I going with that? I was actually going somewhere with that.
You said some people some people who are religious really retreat from the world.
Yeah.
And will not sort of talk or answer someone's questions because they're an unbeliever, and we both just said that's ridiculous.
Yeah, because in the context of trying to find the truth, shouldn't it be? It should be a collaboration, and then to also then claim with certainty that is the one truth is also faulty at the same time, because you ultimately can't be too certain. That's way of faith. Yeah. There's
always elements of faith in it, but like I said, it's that personal experience of how could I think God's not real when I know Him personally?
Yeah,
and He is a friend and He speaks to me.
Yeah, and this person here is experiencing God is interpreting it wrong because their experience is totally different from mine. Therefore, he's wrong.
Yeah, no, it's everyone has all kinds of different experiences.
Yeah, I really want to do a good and evil podcast.
We should.
That'd be so good. Because that is a topic. I'll get you on for the next one because it'll be like an hour, I reckon, of conversation. What are your thoughts on
Can we edit that out?
Yeah,
I just wanted to put one leg onto
right.
the other, and then I was like, I'm on a dress facing the camera.
Black
in a
square.
dress.
It's right. Most on Spotify, it won't be any video anyway. YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to expand outside of Spotify though.
Just put like a little sensor up when I. Yeah. What are my thoughts?
What are your thoughts on those sort of religious people?
The ones that we were just talking about, who I think firstly it's just not a great advertisement in a sense.
Yeah.
If you're anyone wanting someone to not buy a product but sort of join a group, why would you be an arse?
Yeah.
That's just stupid. But secondly, I think it's also very contradictory to what you believe. If you're a Christian, then love is a core part of your beliefs. If you're not going to be loving to someone, then you're not even espousing what you want them to sign up for. It's just sort of, it's ridiculous. So I don't defend when just because someone bears that name, that doesn't mean that they live by it. And if you're not going to, then it's just wrong. It's just wrong on many levels. It makes me angry as well.
Yeah. What about door knockers?
I understand the heart behind door knockers. Some people, I've had this feeling before. You can get a sense of urgency where you sort of, the whole cosmos shrinks into, oh my goodness, we have like a finite amount of time on this earth. I need to tell as many people as possible. And I think it comes from a good heart of, especially if you're within a religion that teaches a doctrine of hell.
Yeah.
You don't want people to go there. And so you're like, I just got to tell them. But I think it is misguided. Firstly, because it has a very low conversion rate. You know, let the evidence speak for itself.
Yeah.
Secondly, you know, no one wants to be part of a religion that they don't feel cared for in. Yeah. And you don't feel cared for if someone's only trying to convert you because your house was the next house on the list. You know, you sort of feel like you're being tricked into it or manipulated. Yeah. And so it's not going to work. The person's going to be frustrated, and it's also just not really socially acceptable. You know, the method of people trying to spread the gospel has changed. This is just within Christianity. Yeah. You know, it's you've got the Crusades, which ended up becoming very violent. You've got the street preachers. You've got the television evangelizers. You've got the door knockers. And in my experience, sort of one-on-one meaningful chats like this are the best way for people to understand things, because there's no hidden agenda here. You know, I'm not here because I knocked on your door. If I did, we wouldn't be sitting here.
I invited you in because you're a vampire. So.
Oh, I'm so pale. It's believable. I was just watching a show last night. Actually, a friend introduced me to the Shadow Hunters.
Oh yeah. That's that used to be a book.
Yes, the Mortal Instruments.
Yeah. My brother's read all that. Yeah.
I haven't read it, but she showed me the show, and I like it.
Yeah, it looks alright.
Yeah,
it'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
They need to bring out more quality shows like that, like Supernatural. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't actually seen Supernatural.
That is I think that's probably the best way to put out like religious like themes in like a modern show.
Yeah.
Like the way they did that was just like awesome.
I'm waiting for a new season of Shadow and Bone.
Yeah. Who's that?
So it reminds me of Shadow Hunters.
Yeah.
Basically, like Shadow Hunters, you're either normal or you've got a power, but if you've got a power, you're called a Grisha.
Okay. And
there's a prophecy about a certain Grisha who's the Sun Summoner, which is the most powerful power you can have, and this young girl basically finds out she is the Sun Summoner. And it's, you know, the classic story if you've got the good and evil, people want to use powers for good and bad, but I just think it's, you know, there's only been one season put out on Netflix. I think it was books, but I haven't read the books. I just got into it because it was starring Ben Barnes. Yeah. And he's been my celeb crush since Prince Caspian.
Oh, fair
enough. So, just confess that. If I ever meet him. But yeah, I think the world they've created and the characters they've created is very well done. Yeah. You know, you can easily do something that's just another show. But I really was invested very early on, and I think that's harder to do these days when there's so much content. But
fucking oath.
Yeah, but it's good. Watch Shadow and Bone. I think it was like season 1 was like 8 or 10 episodes. It's not many at all.
Well, I think we've tackled the topic pretty well now.
Yeah.
Sure. So now, do you have any conspiracies that you believe in?
Is this how you end every episode?
I'm thinking I probably should start doing that.
Yeah, that's how you should end it.
That's what I've been doing the past 3. So, anything because if it's a conspiracy, you wouldn't really know that it's a conspiracy because you'd be in the conspiracy. But is there anything that seems like a conspiracy that you believe in?
There is one.
Yeah.
I'm not like 100% in on this. I would go around arguing it.
Yeah.
But I think it is likely that JFK was assassinated by the mafia, and that was the other guy was just a fall man.
Why?
It seems to make sense to me that he did have a lot of ties.
Yeah.
And the sort of this guy just happened to shoot him.
Yeah.
Just all of it. I'm like,
doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was actually talking with a conspiracy theorist the other day.
Yeah.
And we were debating about the Holocaust. And they believe that the only part of it that was faked was the gas chambers, so that it was a legitimate work camp. Those were showers, and trying to give me reports by scientists showing there were no traces of Zyklon B found in any gas chambers. And so that was just the other day. Really interesting.
The Holocaust wasn't real.
Yeah, that they weren't, that they were never gassed, and that's sort of kind of anti, sort of Western anti-propaganda that, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, against.
What's they do in the chambers then?
Showers, legitimately, and so my response was, okay, so World War II, scarcity of resources, prisoners are. They said that the amount of deaths had just come about by, you know, the typhus that was everywhere, starvation and exposure. And so I'm saying, okay, people are dying of exposure and starvation, and the Germans bothered to shower them.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense to me. People are dying of dehydration.
Yeah. People
are dying of not having enough food. But they constructed showers and tried to shower everyone.
Yeah. We need to go to Auschwitz to prove that.
Well, I've been inside the gas chambers, and so I was sort of like.
They don't look like showers.
There's that sort of room where everyone had to get undressed, and that does look like a sort of you know, if you're like in a pool and there's the shower blocks and then the sort of hooks and that kind of area where you get changed. Yeah. It looks like that, and then within, you know, it was very old, it was very sort of black and ashy within the gas chambers at Auschwitz. And it looks like both, because you know, they tried to mask the chambers as showers and say, oh no, we're just showering prisoners. Well, yeah, but I think it'd be ridiculous that they would ever shower people. And I think, you know, people are dying of disease, and it just is nonsensical to me. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's awful in there. You can see the bit at the top where they would have dropped Zyklon B in, but the sort of argument from this person was, well, there are no photos of anything. I'm like, why would you take photos of something that's going to incriminate you? Yeah. You know, they documented deaths and such, but not that we gassed this person on this day.
Yeah, nothing like that.
Yeah, no photos. Also, they didn't just have cameras. It was a big deal to...
Yeah. So what you're saying is JFK was murdered and the Jews were gassed?
No, they were gassed. I don't believe that. That was I was arguing... that they were, and this person was arguing that they were given showers. Yeah. Okay. And 6 million of them... No, they don't even believe 6 million of them died. Yeah. And, you know, in my time doing history, I kept picking subjects to do with World War II, actually, because I find that so interesting. Yeah. One of my subjects was on Nazi Germany and the origins. Another was just called the Holocaust, where we read a lot of primary sources. Yeah. So yeah, there was no way this person's convincing me, but they keep trying. Yeah, I love that. So shout out to my friend. I've got a random random what's yours? Conspiracy. What do you... This is not something I necessarily believe. It's absolutely random. I actually kind of could believe it. Like coronavirus was made in the lab. Yeah, actually, that's one that I'm leaning towards, that it was started on purpose. Yeah. I think it probably was. Oh, I don't even think on purpose, like maybe even an accident. Like, because it's convenient that it happened in Wuhan, China, and in Wuhan, China, there is a virus lab. And in that, like, they could, like, experiment with viruses in there. And maybe somebody didn't follow the correct protocol, and all of a sudden they let out a virus, and it just started a pandemic. And what's interesting is, even though they created a virus, they didn't shut their borders, international borders. Yeah. They shut them, some of them within the country, so that people within China didn't die. Yeah. Yeah, this is another one that I sort of believe. So you think they made it to wipe out most of the population? Or is like more of a biological warfare thing? I think that they made it to wipe out maybe not necessarily sort of try and genocide the West, but to weaken, because China's been trying for a while to you know, be the economy and the superpower. So economically weaken to West. I think that's true. That is probably I reckon that is like some 4D chess shit though, if that actually did happen. That is some like really complex... Well, people act like it's so unlikely, but it's like, do you actually know much about China? The history of China? Yeah. Like, jump back just to the 50s. Yeah. And, you know, like, Zedong Mao was... not quite intentionally, but very carelessly letting a lot of the population starve.
Yeah.
For the aggrandizement of the country.
Yeah.
So I just don't think it's that realistic that they would want to strengthen China at the expense of letting a virus out. You know, whether it was an accident or not, I think it was deliberate. They definitely let it get everywhere.
Yeah.
And it has weakened, you know, the economy, the West, businesses, you know, physical deaths, mental health. It's been disastrous in many ways, and I think that it was deliberately started in China.
Yeah. Well, we'll end on there,
after
folks.
This, I'll have no friends.
Thank you very much for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been good fun. I really enjoy conversations like this.
Yeah,
it's why I started the podcast anyway.
I love it. I live for it.
It seems to be like podcast seems to be the only avenue that people or like seem to actually be able to sit down and actually talk about something meaningful.
Right.
That isn't just day-to-day chat. Like, you can get a stranger, sit them down, tell us a podcast, and all of a sudden they'll tell you their life story and why they've done it. But out in the street, it's a lot harder to get out of somebody.
It's true, yeah.
It's probably one of the best modern avenues to actually have meaningful conversation.
Yeah, I think it's definitely on the way to becoming the main medium of... Because, you know, people who can't be bothered to read will still listen to podcasts.
Yeah.
People who, if you don't have time in your day for a movie, you can still listen to a podcast of the same length because we spend so much time in transit.
Yeah.
At least, yeah, coming from the Sydney, that was the case.
Yeah.
But I still drive a lot. I spent 4 hours on the road yesterday. 5 hours on the road yesterday.
New medium of communication.
Gets with a lot of podcasts.
Alrighty. We'll end it here. Bye.
See you next time for Good and Evil.